long before the Great Pyramids had reached their full glory, and long before Mesopotamia carved its first royal epics into clay, a forgotten civilization was already rising along the floodplains of the Indus River. For thousands of years, no one knew it existed. No ancient historian wrote about it. No legend survived in the cultures that came after. It vanished so completely that humanity had to rediscover it from the dust. That rediscovery began in the early 1920s, when workers building a railway in British-controlled India pulled bricks from an unremarkable mound near a village called Harappa. Archaeologists from the Archaeological Survey of India, led by men like Daya Ram Sani and later John Marshall, were startled. Those bricks were not typical village debris. They were uniform, baked, and engineered with mathematical precision. As the digging continued, walls emerged. Streets emerged. Then entire neighborhoods. What they had uncovered was not a ruin. It was a city. A few years later, another site, Mohenjo-Daro, was excavated, this time in what is now Pakistan. Mortimer Wheeler, one of the most influential archaeologists of the 20th century, described the shock of uncovering a vast, planned city with multi-room houses, elevated citadels, and complex drainage systems. It contradicted everything historians believed about early civilization. Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China had long been considered the oldest cradles of urban life. Yet here, emerging from the silence of millennia, stood a civilization just as old, just as advanced, and in many ways far more sophisticated. As excavations expanded throughout the 20th century, a stunning realization took shape. This was not one city, but a web of over 1,000 settlements stretching across more than 1 million square kilometers, larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. It belonged to a civilization now known as the Indus Valley Civilization, or the Harappan civilization, dating back at least 5,000 years. What startled researchers most was how different it was from every other great society of the ancient world. The cities were planned so precisely that many modern urban planners still study them. Houses were elegantly standardized, yet varied in function. Streets intersected at perfect right angles. And beneath every home ran the world's earliest known sewage and drainage system, far more advanced than anything in contemporary Bronze Age civilizations. Yet there was something even more shocking. Among all the ruins, archaeologists found no palaces, no royal tombs, no monumental statues, no temples carved in stone, nothing that indicated kings or emperors or divine rulers. The architectural language of domination, so common in Egypt and Mesopotamia, was completely absent. Whoever the Harappans were, they built a civilization without leaving behind the typical fingerprints of power. Their script, carved into seals and amulets, still cannot be read. Despite nearly a century of attempts, including modern computational analysis, no scholar has deciphered their language. This silence deepens the mystery. We have their cities, their tools, their pottery, their jewelry, their toys, but no voice from within their society. The people of the Indus remain strangers, even as their achievements stand before us. What the archaeologists uncovered in those early decades was only the beginning, mere fragments of a civilization that dominated South Asia for centuries before disappearing with astonishing speed. And as modern satellite surveys, sediment analysis, and radiocarbon studies continue to reveal new evidence, one question grows louder. How could a civilization so advanced, so widespread and so stable simply collapse? To answer that, we must go back to the beginning, not to the excavations, but to the landscape that shaped the Indus world and to the rivers whose shifting courses built this civilization and may have destroyed it. To understand how the Indus Valley Civilization rose, we must begin with the land itself, a landscape shaped by rivers that carried the meltwater of the Himalayas, monsoon rains, and the sediments of millions of years. Geography did not merely support this civilization, it engineered it. At the heart of this ancient world flowed the Indus River, one of the longest rivers in Asia, fed by glaciers and seasonal torrents. Its annual floods enriched the soil with thick layers of fertile silt, creating an agricultural corridor capable of sustaining dense populations. Archaeological surveys throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, especially those conducted by Pakistani and international teams, have mapped scores of ancient settlements hugging the river's shifting path. But one river was even more important to the Harappans, the Gagar Hakra, believed by many archaeologists and geologists to be the remnant of a once mighty river that flowed parallel to the Indus. Some scholars associate it with the legendary Saraswati River, described in early Vedic texts as a vast and powerful waterway. Whether or not the ancient Saraswati truly corresponds to the Gagar Hakra, sediment studies and satellite imaging conducted by NASA, ISRO, and the Geological Survey of India offer compelling evidence that a massive river system once flowed through this region during the early Bronze Age. Along this vanished river lie many of the largest Harappan cities: Kalibangan, Banawali, Rakhigarhi, and the fortified settlement of Dholavira. Excavations by Indian archaeologists in recent decades reveal a pattern of urban planning that may have depended on the steady, predictable water flow of this ancient river. Its decline, centuries later, would prove catastrophic, but that part of the story comes later. The environment during the civilization's rise was remarkably favorable. Paleoclimate studies from institutes including Cambridge University and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution suggest that between 3000 and 2500 BCE, the South Asian monsoon was stronger and more reliable than it is today. These abundant rains fed the rivers, supported lush vegetation, and sustained crops across an enormous region. The climate stability coincided with the period when Harappan urban centers soared in population and complexity. This river-fed landscape connected not just cities, but entire ecosystems. The plains were dotted with forests, marshlands, and grasslands. Wildlife included elephants, water buffalo, rhinoceroses, and camels, as indicated by animal bones found in excavation layers. Such biodiversity supported a wide range of economic activities: agriculture, pastoralism, hunting, and the gathering of specialized materials like timber and reeds for construction. Equally important was the civilization's strategic position at the crossroads of two ancient worlds. To the west lay the Iranian Plateau and Mesopotamia. To the east, the Ganges forests. To the north, the passes into Central Asia. The Indus region formed a natural bridge between these cultural spheres, enabling long-distance trade and the movement of ideas. Geological evidence even indicates that the coastlines were different in antiquity, creating harbors that no longer exist, harbors that allowed Harappan merchants to sail across the Arabian Sea. The land itself was a catalyst for innovation. The abundance of clay along riverbanks inspired large-scale brick production. Mineral deposits accessible through mountain routes provided copper, agate, and lapis lazuli. Nearby deserts offered carnelian and shell resources used in crafting jewelry and trade goods. The rivers were not only a source of food and water, but highways of commerce and communication. Every advantage the land offered contributed to the rise of one of humanity's most remarkable urban cultures. Yet this same environment would one day betray the Harappans. The rivers that sustained them were not eternal. The monsoons that nurtured them would change, and the geography that lifted this civilization to greatness would become the stage for its dramatic collapse. But before that decline, the Indus Valley would achieve heights of organization, architecture, and innovation unmatched by any other Bronze Age society. To understand how such a civilization emerged so suddenly, we must explore its earliest roots, the small farming villages that slowly transformed into the first cities. As the rivers carved new channels across the ancient floodplains, small farming communities began to emerge along their fertile banks. These early settlements, dating back to more than 7,000 years ago, formed the quiet foundation of what would become one of the world's most sophisticated civilizations. Among these early sites, none is more important than Mehrgarh, located near the Bolan Pass in present-day Pakistan. Excavations led by French archaeologists in the 1970s and 90s revealed that Mehrgarh was not a simple village. It was a hub of innovation. Here, some of the earliest evidence of agriculture in South Asia was uncovered: domesticated barley, wheat, and one of the earliest known uses of cotton. Copper tools appear in the archaeological layers, along with beads crafted from imported stones. Even more astonishing, dental evidence studied by archaeologists from the University of Poitiers shows that the inhabitants practiced a primitive form of dentistry, drilling teeth with remarkable precision using tiny stone tools. This was 6,000 years before the rise of classical medicine. These early communities grew slowly, shaped by the yearly floods and the dependable monsoon cycle. Over time, they expanded into larger villages, and then into proto-urban settlements. Trade routes began to form, linking the Indus region to the Iranian plateau and beyond. Artifacts found in these early layers, such as turquoise, lapis lazuli, and marine shells, confirm that long-distance exchange networks were already in motion long before the first Harappan cities were built. What drove these modest communities to evolve into a sprawling civilization was not a sudden revolution, but a gradual accumulation of skills, mastery of irrigation, refinement of craft production, and increasing specialization. The archaeological record shows workshops dedicated to pottery, bead-making, weaving, metallurgy, and stone carving. Each generation expanded its knowledge, passing down techniques that became increasingly standardized. By around 3300 BCE, a cultural shift began to take hold. Settlements along the rivers grew denser, homes were built with more durable materials, and administrative markers, such as early seal impressions, began to appear. These seals, carved with animal motifs and abstract symbols, hint at communication systems and economic organization that were becoming more complex. Though the symbols remain undeciphered, their presence in early layers indicates a society moving toward structured administration. As trade intensified, regional craft centers emerged. Archaeologists have found specialized sites where artisans produced beads from carnelian, etched stones, and finely made pottery with geometric patterns. These industries were not isolated, they were coordinated. Materials sourced from distant regions often appear in standardized formats, suggesting planned production and distribution across expanding networks. Burial sites from this period also reveal social changes. Bodies were interred with simple grave goods, pottery, ornaments, tools, indicating respect for individuals but not the emergence of social elites. Unlike early Egypt or Mesopotamia, where powerful chiefs built monumental tombs, the communities that preceded the Harappans maintained an economic equality that would later define their cities. Between 3200 and 2600 BCE, these proto-urban settlements began merging into a unified cultural horizon. Crafts, weights and measures, pottery styles, and architectural techniques became increasingly uniform across vast distances. This was the quiet dawn of a new epoch, the moment when the scattered villages of the Indus began evolving into a coordinated civilization. No conqueror forced them into unity, and no king's inscription announces their rise. Instead, a shared way of life slowly emerged from the combined momentum of agriculture, trade, innovation, and environmental harmony. As the climate remained favorable and the rivers continued to nourish the land, the stage was set for an unprecedented leap, the sudden explosion of full-scale cities, engineered with a precision the ancient world had never seen. What came next was an urban revolution unlike anything humanity had created. Before, planned cities rising from the plains with the discipline of a blueprint, the logic of engineers, and a sophistication that continues to astonish archaeologists today. The transformation from farming settlements into true cities unfolded with remarkable speed. Across the river plains, construction intensified as communities adopted a new architectural vocabulary. Mud brick gave way to standardized fired bricks, each one crafted in a near-perfect ratio of 1 to 2 to 4. This ratio appears across hundreds of settlements, from the Himalayan foothills to the Arabian Sea, indicating a civilization that embraced mathematical consistency in its very foundations. Excavations from sites such as Kotdiji, Amri, and Kalibangan show a sudden rise in large public works, defensive walls, and meticulously organized neighborhoods. Nothing comparable appears in Mesopotamia or Egypt at this scale during the same period. As full urbanization took hold around 2600 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization entered its mature Harappan phase. Cities were no longer growing organically, they were being designed. Archaeologists from both India and Pakistan have documented grid-like street layouts, wide avenues, and sophisticated water management systems that appear fully developed from the earliest layers of these cities. Such rapid standardization suggests not the rule of a monarch, but the coordination of highly efficient civic planners. This new urban world produced one of the most extraordinary cities of the ancient era, Mohenjo-Daro, located near the modern Indus River. Excavations led by R.D. Banerjee, John Marshall, and later by Pakistani archaeologists revealed a metropolis with multi-story homes, internal courtyards, private wells, and bathing platforms. The city's elevated western mound, known as the Citadel, contained large public buildings, granaries, assembly halls, and the famed Great Bath, a massive water tank lined with precision-cut bricks and sealed with bitumen. Its engineering has fascinated scholars for decades, suggesting communal rituals or civic gatherings of a nature still unknown. Equally impressive was the city's drainage system. Every home was connected to covered drains that ran beneath the streets, sloping carefully to allow wastewater to flow away from residential areas. When the archaeologist Ernest Mackay cataloged the drainage system in the 1930s, he observed that many modern cities lacked such efficient sanitation. The Harappans designed their urban spaces not merely for grandeur, but for cleanliness and public health. On the lower mound of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists discovered residential quarters divided into blocks, each with uniform building materials but distinct functions. Some houses had workshops attached where craftspeople produced beads, tools, or pottery. Others had storage rooms, grinding stones, and ovens. The evidence suggests a city with a mixed economy. Artisans, merchants, farmers, and administrators lived in close proximity, united by shared urban standards rather than divided by stark class boundaries. Further north, the city of Harappa displayed similar features, though with its own architectural identity. Long parallel walls, large open courtyards, and multiple granary complexes indicate a community with sophisticated storage and distribution systems. Terracotta figurines, stone tools, and intricate beadwork recovered from Harappa show flourishing industries that required specialized knowledge and organized labor. One of the most revealing discoveries was a series of perforated jars found in standardized forms, possibly used for filtration or ritual functions, another example of the Harappans' obsession with precision. But the most striking feature of both Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa is what isn't found. No statues of rulers, no inscriptions praising kings, no palaces dominating the skyline. This absence has led archaeologists such as Gregory Possehl and Jonathan Mark Kenoyer to argue that Harappan society operated through corporate governance, civic councils, or decentralized authority rather than a central monarch. Whatever structure held their society together, it produced urban systems that remain unparalleled in their balance, order, and harmony. As new cities emerged, Dholavira in Gujarat, Rakhigarhi in Haryana, and Lothal on the coast, the same urban logic replicated with astonishing accuracy. Each city adapted to its environment, yet maintained consistent principles: water conservation in dry regions, flood management in wet areas, and standardized weights and measures across thousands of kilometers. The civilization's unity did not come from conquest, but from shared planning, shared standards, and shared values. This urban revolution created a society of remarkable resilience and architectural brilliance, yet it was only one layer of their achievement. Beneath the orderly streets and brick walls lay an even more complex world: the intimate rhythms of daily life, the foods they ate, the clothes they wore, the tools they made, and the games they played. Understanding the lived experience of the Harappans reveals the human. Daily life in the Indus cities reveals a civilization that balanced practicality with creativity, uniformity with regional expression, and urban discipline with personal comfort. Archaeologists have pieced together this world through thousands of artifacts uncovered in homes, workshops, and marketplaces across Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Lothal, and dozens of smaller settlements. Even without written texts, the material record paints a vivid portrait of how the Harappans lived. Clothing appears to have been simple yet carefully crafted. Terracotta figurines and rare impressions on metal suggest garments made from cotton, the earliest known use of cotton textiles anywhere in the world. A long strip of cloth draped around the waist, sometimes over the shoulder, seems common in male depictions, while female figurines frequently show elaborate jewelry, chokers, bead necklaces, bangles, and headdresses. Excavations led by Jonathan Mark Canoyer and other specialists reveal evidence of complex bead industries that produced carnelian, agate, faience, and shell ornaments with extraordinary precision. Some beads were heated, etched, and polished through multi-step processes that required skilled craftsmanship and controlled furnace temperatures. Dietary remains excavated from hearths and storage areas point to a varied and agricultural diet. The Harappans cultivated wheat, barley, chickpeas, lentils, peas, and sesame. In the wetter regions, they grew rice, while in the drier zones, they relied on millet. Animal bones from butchering sites showed domesticated cattle, buffalo, goats, and sheep, with cattle playing a central role in diet and labor. Fish bones and marine shells discovered in inland cities reveal thriving trade networks that brought seafood inland from coastal regions. The presence of charred grains, grinding stones, and storage jars in household rooms indicates that each home functioned as a self-contained unit, preparing its own food rather than relying on communal kitchens. Craftsmanship permeated the daily environment. Pottery was wheel-thrown, painted with geometric patterns, or molded into delicate forms. Small clay figurines, animals, deities, dancers suggest both entertainment and spiritual expression. Clay toys with movable parts, miniature carts with wheels, and small animal models demonstrate that Harappan children had playthings rivaling those of any ancient civilization. Archaeologists often remark that the Harappans' attention to detail extended even to their toys, reflecting a culture that valued precision at every level of life. Inside the homes, standardized brick construction created cool interiors, resistant to the intense summer heat. Many houses had private wells, over 700 wells, have been found in Mohenjo-Daro alone, allowing families access to clean water without relying on public sources. Bathrooms with sloped floors and drain pipes made water disposal efficient, a feature unheard of in most other ancient societies. These sanitation advances suggest a community deeply concerned with hygiene and public health. Workshops scattered across residential districts produced metal tools, pottery, textiles, and beads. Evidence from tool marks and unfinished products shows assembly line processes, with artisans specializing in distinct stages of production. At sites like Mohenjo-Daro, entire neighborhoods were dedicated to crafting, revealing an industrial sophistication supported by steady demand and extensive distribution networks. Public life also had its rhythms. Large open courtyards may have hosted community gatherings, markets, or civic discussions. In Mohenjo-Daro, a large hall with evenly spaced brick columns suggests a meeting place for administrative or social purposes. Market streets were lined with platforms where vendors likely displayed food, pottery, jewelry, and textiles. Though the Harappans left no texts describing their economy, the archaeological remains indicate a regulated marketplace with standardized weights and measures. These stone weights, carved with mathematical precision, show a decimal-based system remarkably consistent across cities hundreds of kilometers apart. Recreation and intellectual pastimes were part of daily culture as well. Archaeologists have uncovered game boards etched into floors, terracotta pieces shaped like pawns, and dice with precisely drilled pips. Such objects suggest strategic games similar to early forms of chess or pachisi, making it clear that leisure and mental play were valued alongside work. All of these details reveal a civilization devoted not only to engineering and order, but also to comfort, creativity, and personal expression. Their cities were not rigid machines, but vibrant communities supported by shared norms, efficient planning, and a profound respect for cleanliness and living standards. This balanced harmony between public order and private life forms one of the most striking features of the Harappan world. Yet, technological innovation in the Indus world formed the backbone of its stability, efficiency, and interconnectedness. Their engineering achievements were not isolated marvels, but part of a coherent system of urban planning, measurement, metallurgy, and hydraulic control that allowed millions of people to live in synchronized order across vast distances. Archaeological evidence from dozens of sites documents a technological culture far ahead of its contemporaries. One of the most defining features of Harappan innovation is their mastery of standardization. Nowhere in the ancient world do we see such uniformity in bricks, tools, and weights. Brick molds uncovered at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro show identical dimensions used across centuries and across cities separated by hundreds of kilometers. These bricks form the skeleton of their cities. Homes, drainage channels, baths, platforms, and public buildings all used perfectly matched units. This consistency implies not just technical skill, but regulatory control. Craftspeople adhered to a shared standard voluntarily or through civic guidelines, enabling rapid construction and predictable structural quality. Their system of weights and measures demonstrates a mathematical sophistication rarely found in Bronze Age cultures. Cubical stone weights carved from chert, jasper, and other hard stones display a clear binary and decimal progression, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, mirroring systems that would not become widespread elsewhere until much later. These weights have been discovered at trading centers such as Lothal, Dolavira, Mohenjo-Daro, and Harappa, confirming that the same mathematical order governed commerce across the entire civilization. Archaeometric studies show that the accuracy of these weights remained remarkably consistent for centuries. Their metallurgy was equally advanced. Copper and bronze tools, chisels, saws, spearheads, razors, hooks exhibit high-quality casting techniques. Workshops at sites like Lothal and Mergar contain crucibles, slag, and molds, revealing multi-step processes for smelting and alloying metals. Some copper vessels display thin, hammered sheets shaped with finesse comparable to later classical metalwork. The Harappans also experimented with materials such as faience, a glazed, silica-based substance used to create beads, amulets, and figurines. Producing faience required controlling kiln temperatures with precision, indicating mastery over firing techniques. Hydraulic engineering is one of the civilization's most extraordinary achievements. Beyond the household drains, archaeologists studying Dolavira uncovered an enormous water management system composed of stepped reservoirs, stone-lined channels, and massive collecting tanks designed to store rainwater during the monsoon season. Because Dolavira sits in a semi-arid region, its inhabitants engineered an entire urban layout around water conservation. Recent studies by the Archaeological Survey of India show that these reservoirs could have sustained the city even through prolonged dry spells, demonstrating foresight and environmental adaptation unmatched by most ancient societies. On the coast, the port city of Lothal provides evidence of maritime technology. Excavations led by the Archaeological Survey of India in the 1950s revealed a remarkable basin structure connected to a canal, interpreted by many archaeologists as one of the world's earliest dockyards. Although scholars debate its precise function, sediment analysis confirms that seawater once flowed through this basin, supporting the theory of maritime trade with Mesopotamia, Oman, and Bahrain. Terracotta ship models suggest that the Harappans used flat-bottomed boats suitable for river and coastal navigation. The Harappans also extended their technological expertise into personal tools and instruments. Bone and ivory objects, combs, needles, decorative plaques, show a refined sense of craft. Drilled stone beads from sites like Mohenjo-Daro display a level of microscopic precision achieved through corundum-tipped drills or abrasives made from quartz powders. The sophistication of these beads has led researchers to propose that some Harappan artisans were among the most skilled lapidaries of the ancient world. Even the realm of heating and cooking reflects technological ingenuity. Archaeologists have discovered standardized hearths and ovens, including tandoor-like structures used for baking flatbreads. Some industrial areas contain kilns arranged in rows, indicating coordinated ceramic production. Others contain circular platforms with ash concentrations and slag fragments, pointing to metalworking workshops. These interconnected systems, metrology, metallurgy, hydraulics, brickmaking, ceramics, formed an integrated technological web woven through every Harappan city. They allowed for rapid construction, efficient resource distribution, and highly organized production networks. Technology was not a luxury or the economic network of the Indus civilization stretched far beyond its cities, weaving together farming communities, craft workshops, trading hubs, and distant foreign markets into one of the most extensive commercial systems of the ancient world. Archaeologists have traced this network through pottery styles, raw materials, inscriptions, and objects found thousands of kilometers from their origin, evidence that the Harappans were deeply connected to other civilizations long before global trade became a defining force in human society. Their economic engine began with agriculture. The fertile floodplains of the Indus and the now-vanished Ghaggar Hakra supported large-scale farming of wheat, barley, pulses, sesame, dates, and cotton being especially significant, as the Harappans were the first people known to spin and weave it. Agricultural surplus sustained urban populations, freed specialists from farming, and allowed for the rise of large industrial quarters within cities. Irrigation canals, seasonal reservoirs, and floodplain management enabled predictable harvests even during dry periods. From this agricultural base, an intricate web of trade emerged. Excavations at Mehrgarh, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dholavira reveal raw materials sourced from great distances. Copper came from the mines of Baluchistan and Oman, tin from Afghanistan, gold from Karnataka, lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, carnelian from Gujarat, and conch shells from the Arabian Sea. The presence of these materials across Harappan cities shows both the reach of their trade and the demand for luxury goods among their urban populations. One of the clearest signs of their long-distance commerce comes from Mesopotamia, where cuneiform tablets dating to the reigns of Sargon of Akkad and later rulers refer to a distant land called Meluha. Scholars widely agree that Meluha corresponds to the Indus region. Akkadian records describe Meluhan merchants arriving by sea, trading precious woods, ivory, gold dust, carnelian beads, and exotic animals. Cylinder seals found in Mesopotamian cities bear inscriptions referencing Meluhans, and Harappan-style seals have been unearthed in Iraq and Qatar, confirming the cultural and commercial contact. Harappan trade was not limited to Mesopotamia. Maritime routes linked their coastal towns to Bahrain, ancient Dilmun, and the Omani coast. Archaeological missions in Oman have discovered Indus-style pottery, weights, and seals, while chemical analysis of copper artifacts in Indus sites points toward Omani sources. Inland routes connected the Indus to the highlands of Afghanistan and the Iranian plateau, where Harappan beads, ceramics, and tools have been found. Central to this commercial success was the Harappan system of standardized weights and measures. Traders used cubical weights carved with remarkable precision, ensuring fair exchange no matter where transactions occurred. This system created a predictable economic environment, enabling long-distance trade networks to function with minimal conflict. No other Bronze Age civilization achieved this level of economic uniformity across such a large territory. The Harappans also developed specialized industrial centers. At Mohenjo-Daro, entire neighborhoods were devoted to bead making, producing carnelian beads so refined that they became luxury items exported across the ancient world. Balakot and Nagashwar on the coast specialized in shellworking, turning conch shells into bangles, inlays, and ceremonial objects. Lothal housed workshops dedicated to metal, pottery, and bead production, all in close proximity to what many archaeologists interpret as an ancient dockyard. Inside the cities, commercial activity occurred in structured marketplaces. Street-front platforms uncovered at Mohenjo-Daro indicate vendor stalls, where traders likely sold food, textiles, pottery, jewelry, and tools. Surplus goods could be stored in granaries, large brick structures with platforms and ventilation channels, suggesting organized procurement and distribution overseen at the civic level. Seals played a fundamental role in economic administration. These small, square steatite objects engraved with animals and symbols served as identifiers for merchants, workshops, or institutions. Many seals contain a short line of script above the animal motif, indicating a form of labeling or authentication. Their widespread discovery in warehouses, docks, workshops, and homes suggests a sophisticated system of record-keeping. Even though the script remains unreadable, the economic network of the Indus was not one of isolated cities trading independently. It functioned like an integrated macro system. Raw materials moved to craft centers. Finished goods flowed to cities. Merchants distributed them across markets. And long-distance trade brought wealth and exotic materials back into the cycle. This economic harmony was a crucial force holding the civilization together. Yet while they Religion and symbolic expression in the Indus civilization remain among the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. Without decipherable texts, scholars must rely entirely on artifacts, architectural patterns, and contextual clues to reconstruct the Harappan's spiritual landscape. Yet even within these limitations, a distinct worldview emerges, one rooted in nature, fertility, cycles of life, and symbols that hint at beliefs unlike those of contemporary civilizations. At the heart of this symbolic universe are the Indus seals, small square tablets carved from steatite and engraved with animals, script, and ritual scenes. Thousands of them have been found across the Indus region. While their exact function remains uncertain, their distribution in workshops, warehouses, houses, and trading areas suggests they played a role in identification, administration, and ritual practice. Some seals depict single animals, bulls, tigers, elephants, rhinoceroses, drawn with remarkable anatomical detail. Others show composite creatures that may represent mythic or spiritual concepts. One of the most striking seal images is a seated figure surrounded by animals, often identified as a proto-Shiva or Pashupati figure. The figure sits in a yogic posture, wearing a horned headdress with what appear to be multiple faces or perspectives. Although this interpretation is debated, the iconography suggests a deity connected to animals, asceticism, or sovereignty over nature. Its presence on multiple seals indicates a widespread symbolic significance. Terracotta figurines offer another window into Harappan spirituality. Female figurines, often adorned with elaborate jewelry and headdresses, have long been interpreted as representations of fertility goddesses. Some hold infants, others wear belts or girdles associated with ancestors of later South Asian traditions. Male figurines are less common but include masks, bull figures, and miniature carts that may have ritual importance. Because these figurines vary widely in style and complexity, they may represent local traditions integrated into broader regional beliefs. Architectural evidence adds further dimension. At sites such as Kalibangan, archaeologists uncovered fire altars, rows of brick-lined pits containing ash and animal bones. These features appear in domestic settings, suggesting household rituals rather than centralized temple worship. The absence of monumental temples across all Harappan sites implies that religious practices were decentralized and woven into daily life. Public buildings like the Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro may have served as communal spaces for purification or ritual gatherings, although their exact purpose remains speculative. Animal symbolism permeates Harappan art and iconography. The unicorn, a mythical one-horned bull appearing on hundreds of seals, may represent a clan emblem, a commercial brand, or a protective deity. Elephants, tigers, water buffalo, and serpents appear frequently, suggesting reverence for creatures tied to fertility, strength, and the natural world. The use of these animals across multiple regions indicates a shared symbolic vocabulary spanning the entire civilization. Ritual objects also appear in specialized forms. Stone lingam-like objects found in some cities have sparked debate about continuity with later South Asian religious traditions, though scholars caution against drawing direct lines without textual evidence. Conch shells carved with precision, terracotta incense burners, and miniature offering trays hint at domestic rituals involving fragrance, water, and symbolic offerings. Burial practices provide another layer of insight. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Harappans did not build monumental tombs. Instead, graves were simple, often containing a few pottery vessels, personal ornaments, or tools. The uniformity of burial goods suggests a belief system that valued equality in death, or at least avoided ostentatious displays of wealth and power. Some sites reveal examples of symbolic burials, graves containing objects but no bodies, possibly reflecting ancestral rituals or social markers. Despite the richness of this symbolic world, the meaning of the Indus script remains the civilization's greatest mystery. Engraved on seals, pottery, copper tablets, and ivory tags, the script consists of short sequences of signs, rarely exceeding a dozen characters. Recent computational studies suggest that the script follows patterns consistent with language, though its linguistic family remains unknown. Without a bilingual inscription like the Rosetta Stone, its meaning continues to elude archaeologists. yet its presence across the civilization underscores a shared cultural identity, with symbols serving both administrative and ritual functions. Taken together, the Harappan symbolic system reveals a worldview that valued order, nature, purity, and subtlety, rather than monumental power or elaborate priesthoods. The political organization of the Indus civilization presents one of the most perplexing questions in ancient history. At a time when kings ruled Mesopotamia, pharaohs commanded Egypt, and dynasties dominated China, the Harappans left behind no royal inscriptions, no palaces, no conquering armies, and no monumental statues proclaiming divine authority. Their silence on political power is not due to a lack of evidence, it is the evidence. The architectural and archaeological record points to a society that achieved stability and urban sophistication without the visible machinery of authoritarian rule. Excavations across Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and other cities reveal a striking uniformity in city planning, architectural proportions, weights and measures, and craft standards. This consistency across thousands of kilometers implies coordination, yet there is no trace of a central capital. Instead of one dominant metropolis, multiple major cities flourished simultaneously, each with its own regional strengths. Dholavira excelled in water management, Lothal in maritime trade, Mohenjo-Daro in industrial production, and Harappa in administrative control. Such distributed specialization suggests a network of autonomous or semi-autonomous urban centers bound together by shared norms rather than a single centralized kingdom. Evidence from large public buildings also complicates traditional political interpretations. Structures once labeled granaries at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro lack clear parallels to known storage complexes in other ancient societies. Their segmented rooms and raised platforms have led scholars to propose alternatives: administrative depots, workshop hubs, or civic meeting areas. These interpretations reflect a political system organized around functional efficiency rather than royal display. The absence of throne rooms, barracks, or central temples further strengthens the argument that governance was collective, civic, and institutional rather than monarchical. The distribution of artifacts within cities hints at a relatively egalitarian social structure. Most homes, whether large or modest, contain private wells, bathing areas, and standardized construction materials. Luxury goods like carnelian beads, faience ornaments, and fine ceramics appear throughout urban layers, not confined to elite compounds. This broad access to comfort and craftsmanship implies a society with fewer extremes of wealth than those seen elsewhere in the Bronze Age. Differences in house size certainly existed, but they lacked the exaggerated scale indicative of royalty or aristocracy. Administrative tools offer additional clues. Seals bearing animal motifs and short script sequences appear across workshops, warehouses, docks, and storage rooms. Their widespread distribution suggests a system of economic and civic accountability. Rather than representing individual rulers, these seals may have denoted guilds, merchant groups, corporate households, or civic offices. The repeated appearance of specific symbols across multiple cities indicates standardized administrative practices, a sign of systemic governance rather than personal rule. One of the most telling features is the complete absence of fortifications around major cities during the civilization A.S. peak. Purely defensive walls, citadels designed for siege resistance, and military barracks are conspicuously missing from the mature Harappan layers. While some settlements show perimeter walls, these often appear to serve flood control or civic separation rather than military defense. The lack of weapons in large quantities, no mass arrowheads, spear racks, or chariot remains supports the image of a society that did not revolve around warfare or territorial expansion. This stands in stark contrast to other civilizations of the period, where conquest and defense shaped culture and architecture. The Harappans seem to have embraced a model of governance rooted in consensus, civic responsibility, and standardized systems. Modern scholars sometimes describe this as corporate organization, where power is distributed among institutions rather than concentrated in a single ruler. This form of governance may have been supported by councils of elders, professional guilds, or civic administrators who oversaw planning, water systems, trade, and public works. The remarkable consistency in the archaeological record indicates that these structures operated smoothly for centuries. Yet this political model, harmonious and efficient as it was, carried vulnerabilities. A system without centralized power may adapt well during stability but struggle during systemic stress. As environmental pressures intensified and economic networks began to falter, the absence of a centralized authority capable of rapid, large-scale mobilization may have shaped the trajectory of the civilization's decline. But before the collapse, the Harappans would face environmental challenges that tested the R. Environmental stability had been the silent ally of the Indus civilization for centuries, but the climate that once nurtured their cities began to shift in ways both gradual and devastating. The story of their decline does not begin with invaders or political turmoil. It begins with the sky, the rivers, and the monsoon system that had sustained their agricultural engine. Climatologists, geologists, and archaeologists have spent decades reconstructing this environmental transformation through sediment cores, isotope analysis, and satellite imaging. And the picture that emerges is one of increasingly fragile ecological balance. Around 2200 BCE, global climate fluctuations affected civilizations across the Old World. The Akkadian Empire to the west collapsed under the strain of prolonged drought. Egypt's Old Kingdom experienced severe famine. Settlements across the Near East shrank or fortified themselves. In South Asia, the monsoon, a lifeline for the Harappan world, began to weaken. Studies conducted by the Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur and corroborated by isotope data from Himalayan lakes show a steady decline in monsoon intensity during this period. With less rainfall feeding the rivers and replenishing groundwater, the lush plains of the Indus region slowly dried. The Ghaggar-Hakra River, fed largely by monsoon rains and seasonal runoff, appears to have been the first major casualty. Satellite imaging by NASA and ISRO, combined with geological dating, reveals that this river system gradually lost its perennial flow. Settlements along its banks, some of the largest and most prosperous in the civilization, faced dwindling water supplies. Crops that once flourished under dependable monsoon patterns became vulnerable to drought, and communities began experiencing seasonal stress. As water became inconsistent, the agricultural system that supported dense urban populations began to fray. Archaeobotanical studies at sites like Farmana and Harappa show a shift in crop patterns. Hardy millets and drought-resistant pulses replaced water-intensive wheat and barley. This transition reflects adaptation, not collapse. But it also signals a society under environmental pressure. Farmers were no longer planting for abundance, but for survival. The Indus River itself also changed course over time. A natural process in large river systems, but catastrophic when it occurs rapidly. Sediment studies from the University of Southampton indicate that tectonic activity and monsoon weakening altered the River AS path, leaving some settlements stranded far from reliable water sources. Cities that once stood on riverbanks now found themselves miles from sustainable channels. Without modern infrastructure, such sudden displacement of water routes undermined both agriculture and trade. Dholavira, located in the dry Kutch region, provides a vivid example of environmental stress. Excavations by the Archaeological Survey of India revealed that the city's reservoirs were expanded multiple times, evidence of increasing scarcity and attempts to capture every drop of monsoon rain. Even with their exceptional engineering, repeated cycles of drought pushed the city to its limits. Eventually, the reservoirs could no longer sustain its population. Along the coast, shifts in sea levels and river discharge affected ports like Lothal. Sediment deposits show that waterways leading to the dockyard gradually silted up, leaving the once thriving port disconnected from the sea. Without access to maritime trade, Lothal's significance diminished, reflecting wider disruptions in the Harappan economy. The environmental changes did not strike all at once. They unfolded over centuries, slow enough for adaptation, but relentless enough to erode the foundations of urban life. The Harappans responded with resilience, changing crops, moving settlements, modifying water systems, and adapting to new ecological realities. But the cumulative pressure of weaker monsoons, river migration, droughts, and soil degradation created a long and uneven crisis. As water became increasingly scarce, the intricate web that connected workshops, farms, trade routes, and urban centers began to loosen. Without reliable harvests, markets shrank. Without dependable rivers, transport faltered. Without abundant resources, craft production slowed. The once seamless coordination across the civilization gradually unraveled. And because the political system lacked a central authority capable of large-scale intervention, each region responded independently, fragmenting the unity that had defined the Harappan world. The environmental strain set the stage for one of history's most dramatic transformations: the gradual abandonment of cities, the migration of populations, and the dissolution of an urban civilization that had endured for nearly 1,000 years. Yet the collapse was not a sudden catastrophe. It was a drawn-out struggle shaped by climate, water, and the limits of adaptation. As environmental stress intensified, the Harappan world entered a period of fragmentation that archaeologists refer to as the late Harappan phase. The great cities, once centers of engineering, commerce, and culture, began to thin out, not through violent destruction, but through quiet abandonment. Excavation layers at Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dolavira show a decline in construction quality, reduced maintenance of public works, and shifting urban footprints. Streets that had once been meticulously repaired were left to accumulate debris. Drainage systems clogged. Brick proportions, so uniform for centuries, began to vary, reflecting the erosion of shared standards. Population movement became one of the defining characteristics of this period. As rivers dried or shifted, communities migrated eastward and southward toward regions with more reliable water. Archaeological surveys in Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and the Upper Ganges Basin reveal the appearance of small, late Harappan settlements where earlier layers were absent, marking the movement of people away from declining urban centers. Pottery styles associated with the Harappan tradition appear in these newer areas, showing cultural continuity even as the old cities faded. The decline in long-distance trade is evident in the archaeological record. At Harappan ports like Lothal, foreign goods become scarce in later layers, and workshops tied to export industries shrink or disappear. The production of carnelian beads, a major export, declines sharply. Mesopotamian records also reflect the shift. References to Meluha vanish from cuneiform tablets by the 2nd millennium BCE, indicating that contact with the Indus world had diminished or ceased. Craft specialization weakened as economic networks contracted. Workshops that once operated on an industrial scale began producing fewer goods, and the refinement of materials dropped noticeably. At Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, bead-making techniques simplified. Pottery became thicker and less uniform. The disappearance of high-quality faience objects further reflects the decline of complex manufacturing processes that required sustained expertise and resource flows. Even the symbolic world of the Harappans shows signs of transition. The iconic square seals with intricate animal motifs and script become rarer, replaced by simpler terracotta ceilings or disappearing altogether in some regions. Figurines shift in style, becoming more localized and less standardized. Ritual practices appear to fragment as well, with fire altars emerging in some late Harappan sites but not others, suggesting increasing regional diversity rather than a unified cultural vision. Social reorganization followed these material changes. Without the economic and administrative structures that supported urban life, populations dispersed into smaller, more self-sufficient communities. These settlements lacked the large public buildings, extensive drainage systems, and complex infrastructure of earlier cities. Instead, they organized around local water sources, farmed smaller plots, and returned to forms of village life resembling the early stages of the civilization's rise, but now under ecological strain. There is no evidence of widespread warfare or external invasion during this period. Weapons remained scarce, fortifications minimal, and mass graves absent. The collapse of the Indus civilization does not reflect military conquest, but systemic stress, gradual depopulation, and the unraveling of an interconnected economic and technological network. Even in decline, the Harappans showed remarkable resilience. Rather than vanish in a catastrophic event, they adapted, migrated, and transformed. Regional cultures that emerged after the urban centers dissolved demonstrate continuity with Harappan traditions. Pottery motifs, agricultural practices, craft techniques, and settlement patterns survived in modified forms. These cultural threads wove into the fabric of later South Asian societies, influencing developments in the Ganges region and contributing to the foundation upon which subsequent civilizations evolved. The final abandonment of major cities like Mohenjo-Daro appears to have been incremental. Flood layers indicate attempts to rebuild after environmental events, but each reconstruction was smaller in scale and shorter in duration. Ultimately, the city's population dwindled to a point where public works could no longer be sustained, and the once great metropolis fell silent. Harappa followed a similar trajectory. Its neighborhoods gradually emptied as families sought better conditions elsewhere. By around 1700 BCE, the Harappan urban system had dissolved, but its people did not disappear. They redistributed themselves across the subcontinent, integrating with or influencing emerging regional cultures. The collapse was not an extinction, it was a transformation. Yet the story does not end with dispersal. The long afterlife of the Harappan tradition s. The communities that emerged after the dissolution of the Harappan urban system did not simply replace the old civilization. They inherited parts of it, reshaped them, and carried them into new cultural landscapes. Archaeological evidence shows that the late Harappan world did not vanish abruptly, but morphed into a mosaic of regional traditions, each adapting elements of the Harappan legacy to their shifting environments and social conditions. In the eastern regions, particularly in Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh, settlements grew around the more reliable tributaries of the Ganges. These communities adopted many Harappan technologies, including pottery styles, agricultural methods, and aspects of urban planning, but at a smaller scale suited to village life. The distinctive red and black pottery characteristic of the late Harappan phase appears widely in these areas, revealing a cultural thread carried by migrating populations. Storage jars, cooking vessels, and painted motifs show clear continuity with earlier craftsmanship, though simplified and regionally varied. In the foothills of the Himalayas and the plains of Punjab, clusters of small settlements continued to use standardized weights and measures long after the major cities had disappeared. Their persistence suggests that Harappan economic logic survived at the local level, sustaining trade and exchange networks even without the backbone of a vast urban administration. Some communities maintained bead-making traditions, producing simpler versions of the once sophisticated carnelian beads that had reached distant markets during the civilization's peak. Farther south in Gujarat, the transformation took on a different character. Sites like Rangpur and Rojdi show continuity in craft production, especially in shellworking and pottery. Their communities adapted Harappan techniques to new ecological realities, integrating local traditions with the remnants of older practices. In some areas, new pottery styles emerged that blended Harappan motifs with distinct regional designs, illustrating a dynamic cultural fusion rather than a sudden cultural break. Material culture also adapted to new subsistence strategies. As populations moved eastward into wetter regions, rice cultivation expanded. Archaeobotanical remains indicate that late Harappan communities diversified their crops, emphasizing resilience over surplus. The shift from wheat and barley-dominated agriculture to mixed farming reflects both ecological adaptation and evolving cultural preferences. New settlements often formed around stable water sources, lakes, small rivers, and perennial streams, suggesting a conscious strategy to avoid the vulnerabilities that had plagued the old cities. Ritual and symbolic practices likewise evolved. Fire altars discovered at sites like Rakhigarhi and Daimabad represent a departure from earlier Harappan traditions, signaling emerging belief systems or interactions with neighboring cultures. Figurines during this period vary more widely in form, implying local interpretations of spiritual practices. While the iconic Harappan seals disappear, terracotta impressions and small tokens take their place, indicating that systems of marking identity or property persisted in new forms. One of the most intriguing aspects of this post-urban world is the gradual spread of cultural patterns into the Ganges Basin, an area that would later become the heartland of subsequent Indian civilizations. Archaeological surveys reveal that certain Harappan technologies, particularly metallurgy, beadmaking, and ceramic styles, were adopted by early settlements in this region. Although the degree of continuity remains debated, many scholars argue that Harappan-descended groups played a role in transmitting agricultural knowledge, craft traditions, and settlement planning concepts that influenced later cultural developments. In Western India, the overlap between late Harappan communities and the emerging Chalcolithic cultures created hybrid traditions. Sites like Daimabad, Malvan, and Jorwe exhibit mixed artifacts. Harappan-style beads and pottery appear alongside new local tools and symbolic objects. These interactions demonstrate that the Harappan diaspora assimilated into regional frameworks rather than disappearing, contributing elements of their material and cultural heritage to the societies that followed. Even after the decline of their cities, the Harappans' emphasis on cleanliness, structured planning, hydraulic management, and standardized production left an imprint on settlement patterns for centuries. The well-planned layouts of later towns in Gujarat and Rajasthan echo Harappan principles, suggesting cultural memory carried through generations. The transformation of the Indus civilization was not merely a collapse, it was a diffusion, a spreading of people, ideas, and techniques that seeded new cultural landscapes across South Asia. This diffusion created a vast network. For millennia after the Harappan cities fell silent, the memory of their civilization vanished from human consciousness. No ancient historian wrote of them. No surviving tradition preserved their names. Their cities were swallowed by shifting rivers, buried under layers of silt, or eroded by desert winds. What remained of one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of the ancient world lay hidden in the ground, waiting for tools that had not yet been invented and languages that had not yet evolved. The rediscovery began only in the 19th century, during the age of colonial survey expeditions. British engineers, archaeologists, and railway planners crisscrossed the Indian subcontinent, often unaware that the mounds they walked across were the ruins of long-lost cities. Early hints surfaced when explorers like Alexander Cunningham collected seals and pottery fragments, but without context, their significance went unrecognized. The breakthrough came in the early 20th century, when the Archaeological Survey of India began systematic excavations at Harappa under Dayaram Sani and at Mohenjo-Daro under R.D. Banerjee. As bricks surfaced, uniform, ancient, and unfired by modern kilns, the scale of what lay beneath became clear. John Marshall A.S. announcement in 1924 that an unknown Bronze Age civilization had been unearthed shocked the archaeological world. Until that moment, historians believed Mesopotamia and Egypt were the only great urban civilizations of antiquity. The Indus discovery redrew the map of ancient history. Throughout the 20th century, excavations expanded across Pakistan and India, revealing city after city and settlement after settlement. Archaeologists documented intricate drainage systems, standardized bricks, workshops, wells, and craft industries, each discovery reinforcing the impression of a remarkably sophisticated society. Yet every question answered created two more. What language had these people spoken? Why had their civilization disappeared? Why were there no kings, no temples, no war monuments? Advances in scientific techniques brought new insights. Radiocarbon dating established the time frame of Harappan expansion and decline. Sediment analysis traced ancient river courses, supporting geological theories about the drying of the Gagar Hakra. Microscopic study of plant remains revealed crop patterns that reflected environmental stress. Isotope analysis from skeletal remains shed light on diet and migration patterns. Each interdisciplinary method added texture to a civilization once known only through bricks and pottery. One of the most transformative developments came from satellite imagery. NASA and ISRO data revealed massive paleo-channels, fossilized riverbeds, running through regions where major Harappan cities once flourished. These findings supported long-standing theories that a major river, now vanished, had sustained many of the civilization's largest settlements. Remote sensing also identified potential settlement mounds, enabling archaeologists to map a civilization far larger than previously imagined. Underwater archaeology expanded the picture further. Explorations near the coast of Gujarat uncovered submerged structures and artifacts consistent with Harappan construction, suggesting that sea level changes and coastal erosion had swallowed parts of the civilization's maritime world. These discoveries help explain why the archaeological record seems incomplete and why certain trade routes abruptly shifted. Scientific analyses also deepened understanding of Harappan materials. Chemical tests on carnelian beads identified specific workshops and production centers. Metallurgical studies traced copper and tin to distant mines in Afghanistan and Oman. Residue analysis on pottery illuminated dietary habits and agricultural changes over time. Each technological insight peeled back a layer of mystery and enriched the story of a civilization once believed lost. Yet despite the progress, some mysteries remain stubbornly unsolved. The script, despite computational attempts, pattern analysis, and comparisons with neighboring languages, has resisted all decipherment. With no bilingual inscriptions and no long texts, the language of the Harappans remains silent. The nature of their political organization, whether decentralized, corporate, or governed by rotating councils, continues to inspire debate. Even the precise sequence of events leading to urban decline eludes definitive explanation, though environmental stress is recognized as the central driver. What modern archaeology has revealed, however, is indisputable. The Indus Valley Civilization was one of the great achievements of human antiquity. Its rediscovery reshaped our understanding of early urbanism, technological innovation, and ecological adaptation. And its legacy, subtle but enduring, continues to echo through the cultural and historical developments of South Asia. With the hidden cities uncovered, the rise and fall of the Indus civilization offers one of humanity's clearest case studies of how advanced societies interact with their environment, how they flourish when conditions align, and how they falter when ecological pressure exceeds the ability to adapt. In this sense, the Harappans are not merely an ancient people. They are a lens through which we can examine the sustainability of modern civilizations. Their greatest strength was their capacity to create stability. For nearly 1,000 years, the Harappans maintained a vast urban network without war monuments, standing armies, or displays of conquest. Their achievements in sanitation, standardized engineering, civil governance, and long-distance trade demonstrate a society that invested in cooperation rather than domination. Modern urban planners often marvel that cities built 4,000 years ago had cleaner water systems than many modern urban centers. Their methods show what can be achieved when resources are managed with discipline and foresight. Yet the same environment that supported their success also exposed the limits of even the most efficient systems. When the monsoon weakened and rivers changed course, the Harappans faced a challenge that no technology, no governance model, and no trade network could fully overcome. Their cities were built on assumptions of stable water sources and predictable climate patterns. When those patterns shifted, the complex web of production, distribution, and civic maintenance began to fray. Their collapse was not sudden. It unfolded over centuries. But the long arc of decline illustrates how interconnected systems can fail slowly and silently. Urban centers did not burn, they emptied. Workshops did not cease overnight. They shrank. Trade routes did not close in a single season. They faded as conditions deteriorated. This gradual unraveling is a powerful reminder that the downfall of a civilization is rarely a dramatic moment. It is the cumulative effect of pressures that societies are too slow or too fragmented to address. The Harappans adapted to these pressures in multiple ways. They changed crops, altered settlement patterns, developed new water systems, and relocated populations. These strategies show resilience, not helplessness. Yet despite these efforts, they could not restore the delicate balance that had supported their urban world. Their story highlights the limits of local adaptation in the face of large-scale environmental transformation, a lesson that resonates in an era of rising global temperatures, shrinking water reserves, and unpredictable climate patterns. Modern parallels are striking. Like the Harappans, today's societies depend on intricate supply chains, shared standards, and cooperative systems that allow millions to live in dense urban environments. Water scarcity, shifting rainfall patterns, and ecological instability threaten these systems in ways that echo the challenges of the ancient world. The Harappans' experience reminds us that advanced infrastructure and sophisticated planning cannot fully shield societies from the consequences of environmental change. One of the most significant lessons of the Indus civilization is the importance of flexible governance. Their decentralized, consensus-based system worked extraordinarily well during times of abundance, enabling cities to thrive without authoritarian control. But during prolonged crisis, this distributed system may have lacked mechanisms for rapid, unified response. No central authority could reroute rivers, coordinate mass irrigation projects across hundreds of kilometers, or mobilize large-scale ecological interventions. As regional pressures intensified, the coherence of the civilization dissolved into local responses that proved insufficient for the scale of the challenge. At the same time, the Harappans offer a contrasting message. A civilization does not have to be militaristic or hierarchical to succeed. Their achievements in hygiene, city planning, craft specialization, and trade demonstrate paths of development grounded in cooperation, equity, and shared civic values. Their world was not built on conquest but on order, precision, and community-driven stability. This alternative model of civilization challenges the assumption that power must be concentrated for societies to thrive. Reflecting on the Harappans also encourages us to consider how cultural memory is formed and lost. A civilization of millions, with vast cities and advanced technologies, vanished from history so completely that its rediscovery occurred only a century ago. Without written texts or monumental inscriptions, their achievements nearly disappeared from human knowledge. The fragility of memory underscores how easily the accomplishments of even the greatest societies can fade when records vanish and narratives are not preserved. In the modern world, where digital information seems permanent yet remains vulnerable to disruption, across South Asia today, the echoes of the Indus civilization still live quietly in the traditions, technologies, and cultural rhythms of its descendants. Subtle reminders of a society that once mastered environmental adaptation, civic engineering, and peaceful coexistence. Though their names, languages, and stories have been lost, their influence endures in ways both tangible and invisible, woven into the region's heritage long after their cities crumbled. Agricultural practices that sustained the Harappans, such as mixed cropping, floodplain farming, and the cultivation of barley, wheat, and millets, continue in parts of India and Pakistan today. Pottery techniques, styles of bead making, and domestic architecture in rural communities still follow patterns that resemble ancient Harappan designs. Traditional well construction in the region mirrors the private wells found in nearly every Harappan home, demonstrating a continuity of knowledge passed through generations without awareness of its origin. Concepts of sanitation and water management pioneered by the Harappans can be seen reflected in later South Asian traditions that emphasize cleanliness, ritual bathing, and efficient use of water. The legacy of faience production, carnelian beadmaking, and metallurgical techniques survived in evolving craft traditions long after the cities themselves were abandoned. Even symbolic motifs, horned figures, animal emblems, geometric patterns reappear in later cultural artifacts, suggesting that elements of the Harappan symbolic language echoed into subsequent artistic traditions. Genetic studies over the past decade also reveal a thread of continuity. Research involving ancient DNA samples from Harappan sites, combined with genomic studies of modern South Asian populations, indicates that the people of the Indus region contributed significantly to the ancestry of millions living in South Asia today. Far from vanishing, the Harappans became part of the genetic and cultural foundation of the subcontinent. Their influence extends beyond biology and craft traditions. The very idea of urban order, structured streets, standardized materials, integrated drainage, set a precedent that later civilizations would rediscover and reinterpret. Although centuries separated the Harappans from later urban societies in the Ganges Basin, the conceptual roots of organized civic life can be traced back to the world they built. Yet perhaps the most profound legacy of the Harappans lies in the questions they leave behind. Their script, stamped on thousands of seals and tablets, remains unreadable. Within those symbols may lie the names of rulers or councils, records of trade, hymns of worship, or stories of their origins. The decipherment of the script could reshape our understanding of early South Asian history, linking the Harappans more clearly to later traditions or revealing entirely unexpected connections. Until then, the silence of their language serves as both a challenge and an invitation. Modern archaeology continues to push the boundaries of what we know. Every year, new sites are identified through satellite imaging. New analyses refine the timeline of environmental change, and new excavations uncover details of daily life that allow us to reconstruct this vanished world with increasing clarity. The Indus civilization, once lost to time, is now one of the most active frontiers of archaeological research. Each discovery deepens the narrative, revealing an ancient society whose complexities we have only begun to understand. Their story is not simply one of rise and fall. It is a narrative of resilience, adaptation, innovation, and quiet transformation. A civilization that reached impressive heights without the trappings of kingship or empire, and that responded to environmental pressures with ingenuity, even as those pressures ultimately surpassed its capacity to cope. In studying the Harappans, we encounter both the brilliance and fragility of human societies. We see what people can achieve when cooperation replaces conquest, when civic planning outweighs monumental display, and when resource management is treated as a collective responsibility. We also see the limits of technological and social systems when environmental conditions shift beyond their design. The vanished cities of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dolavira, Lothal, and Rakhigarhi stand today not as ruins of failure, but as monuments to ingenuity. Their bricks, drains, workshops, and artifacts tell the story of a civilization that mastered the art of living in harmony with nature, until nature changed. Their disappearance reminds us that even the most advanced societies are bound to the environments they inhabit, and that the balance between human ambition and ecological reality must be respected. As modern societies confront rising seas, shifting climates, and dwindling resources, the Harappan experience carries a message that grows more urgent with every passing decade.